Let's draw a butterfly on a flower. We'll do the background first and then the foreground. The background is quite large and I want to draw that as quickly as possible so that I can get onto the flower and the butterfly. So to speed up the drawing process, I use a cloth coated in graphite powder to block in the background. As I work, I come as close to the edge of the foreground object as possible without losing my initial sketch lines. Now blocking in with a cloth like this can take quite a few layers to get the correct tonal value, especially in a drawing like this where the background must be dark. As I work, I then use my pen-shaped eraser to ensure that I don't lose the edges of the flower and the butterfly. Once I'm happy with the background tonal value, I work on the edges of the foreground objects. We don't want a halo around the foreground objects. The background must look like it's going behind the flowers. I then use pencils to even out the background tonal values around the edges of the flower. That also ensures I have nice crisp edges on the foreground objects, and as a result we can already picture the flower and butterfly from their silhouettes. Now let's start adding some detail to the background. We don't want a lot of detail, just enough to show our flowers are in the garden. I use a kneaded eraser to lift out a few random shapes in the background, and I use an 8B pencil to add a few abstract shadow shapes in the background. Now although I am using the photo for inspiration, I'm not trying to copy it. We want our background to be a lot more simplified than on the photo. Otherwise the background is going to get too busy and start competing with the foreground for attention. With the background complete, we can start on the butterfly. The butterfly looks quite complex to draw, but it's actually not that hard. I start by establishing the sharp, dark lines and shapes, then move on to the more subtle markings. When drawing these markings, I ignore the fact that I'm drawing a butterfly, and I just concentrate on replicating the position, shape, and tonal value of the marking. What we have now is a flat butterfly, so to add dimension to it, my attention shifts to drawing the shadings caused by the shape and angle of the wings and body. These shadings are usually most prominent where two features meet, for example, where two wings meet or where the body meets the wing, and that's because you usually have an angle change where the two features meet. To draw the antenna, I erase a thin line using my pen-shaped eraser, then carefully fill in the unwanted areas again so that only the highlights are visible. Using a dark, sharp pencil, I draw in the actual antenna, being careful not to lose those erased highlights. With the butterfly complete, I revisit the background to ensure that there's no halo around the insect. Now let's move on to the flowers. When drawing flowers, I always start with the back petals and gradually make my way forward. I draw one petal at a time. That way, I only need to concentrate on a few shadings at a time, and by the time the flower is complete, the petals will look like they overlap each other. Inside each petal, you need to look out for a few things. The first is the overall tonal value of the petal. The petal's lightest color is seldom white, and its darkest tonal value is seldom black. You will need to find the overall lightest tonal value and block in the entire petal using that color. I call this the base tonal value. From there, you can lift out any little highlights and shade in the shadows. With the base tonal value established, I look at the overall shape and curve of the petal. This shape and curve will cause the petal to become gradually darker as it curves away from the light. You then shade in these tonal value changes. From there, look at any ribs and veins in the petal and concentrate on drawing them. Ribs and veins will often have a highlight and a shadow side, so use your pen-shaped eraser to lift out the highlight and your pencil to add the shadow. A common mistake when adding these ribs, though, is to draw in the ribs too dark and too prominent. More often than not, they are very subtle, so always draw them in using too light a pencil. It's easier to darken them from there than to try to lighten them back up again. Lastly, I will look for any blemishes on the petal and I'll draw them in. Other things you can look out for when drawing flowers are The area where the petal curls inwards to meet the center of the flower is usually quite dark, so much so that you may not be able to see where one petal stops and the other one starts. This is called a last line. The petal also has thickness, so you need to look out for the thin highlight or shadow on the edge of the petal and draw it in where visible. As the flower is round, it will have one side which overall is lighter than the other. In this flower, the back left-hand side is lighter than the front right-hand side. You need to draw this overall change in tonal value, otherwise your flower is going to look flat. In some drawings, you may even need to use your artist's license to increase this change in tonal value in order to make the flower look rounder. For the stems, I concentrate on showing the roundness of the stem. One side will be lighter than the other, so shade that in first. Then look out for any textures, ribs and markings and draw them in. Lastly, look out for any sunspots or cast shadows on the stem and draw them in. The leaves in this flower are very dark, so I pretty much just block them in, leaving only the lightest contrast to suggest the veins on the leaves. With the flower complete, I stand back to compare the tonal values on the drawing against those on the reference photo. Standing back allows you to see the picture as a whole, and you'll be surprised at how many adjustments you can pick up when standing back like this. To complete the flower, I revisit the background to ensure that there is no halo around the flower. I then repeat the same process with all the other flowers in the drawing, and with that, the drawing is complete. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have, please like and subscribe. Also visit our website to follow the real-time step-by-step draw-along version of this class. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.